New York City's mayor pushing back on criticism of a new $50 million program to hand out prepaid debit cards to migrant families.
We need to dispel the rumor that we gave American Express cards to everyone.
I think they might actually be MasterCards.
Some migrant families will soon be given prepaid credit cards to buy food and baby supplies.
If this is successful, we're going to expand it even more.
It may be the most reprehensible thing that I've seen take place over the past 48 hours.
The asylum seekers are sharing their side of the story.
This mom of two says sometimes the food smells bad, rotten.
The cards can only be used at bodegas, grocery stores, supermarkets, and convenience stores.
Potentially saving taxpayers roughly $7 million a year.
I'm not going to be thankful that a program that was bloated and inefficient is somehow cheaper to just give away free money to people.
The controversy over this new credit card program is swirling. But I spoke to somebody that works at one of the shelters, and they told me that the families inside, they're not getting enough food, even though the city is spending millions of dollars on food contracts. So now they're giving out $53 million worth of prepaid plastic so that people can buy their own food. But what most people don't know is the $53 million is getting divided up over just 700 families. Think about that for a second. 700 families, $53 million. If the city were to expand this program, it would likely bankrupt New York completely. But there's actually an even bigger reason why this program may not work at all, and nobody's talking about it. And that's because just the idea of giving prepaid credit cards to people who don't have the ability to work yet, that in and of itself was enough to draw high-level criticism from all corners of the political spectrum. But what's crazy is the city might actually end up saving money even though they're going through with this credit card program.
This mom of two says sometimes the food smells bad, rotten, and every time the children eat the food like that, they get food poisoning.
One of the city's food contracts costs $432 million for rotten, undercooked food, allegedly. And since tens of thousands of dollars of food are being thrown away, people say the credit cards will save a ton of money. Plus, it's probably gonna be healthier. But is it really an accomplishment to save money when the program was so bad and wasteful to begin with? Plus, the timing of this program's announcement is politically controversial, as there have recently been several high-profile arrests involving asylum seekers that caught national attention, like this incident right here, the attack on police in Times Square. And critics of this program say it's not actually gonna save the city money because the idea of credit cards may encourage some folks to decide to make the Big Apple their next stop. But is that really true? And why in the world does the city think it's a good idea to give out credit cards to people who could use them to buy anything, like candy or junk food? So this here is one of the city's shelters that houses families who may be eligible for this credit card program. This is the Roosevelt, a former luxury hotel here in Midtown, and this building is reserved exclusively for families.
Some migrant families will soon be given prepaid credit cards to buy food and baby supplies. The mayor's office says the city is partnering with Mobility Capital Finance to launch a more cost-effective program.
So the key word here is cost-effective. That's what this is supposed to be, but as we're gonna see shortly, there are some serious problems with it, which are gonna stop it from working. But New York City's leadership is all behind this, and they think it's a home run idea. And compared to contractors throwing out the food people are supposed to eat, it probably is. Because last November, the city was caught wasting 70,000 meals a month that cost $11 each. That's $770,000. When this report came out, city officials accused asylum seekers of being ungrateful. But asylum seekers interviewed by news outlets say the food was making them sick. Believe who you want, but the company providing the meals is a former medical services provider. They provided PPE, rubber gloves, paper towels to the city, and now they provide food. So they're not like they were not always a food company. And the food they provide is winding up in the garbage.
Cards would curb the cost of inefficient food distribution that has led to expensive food waste, potentially saving taxpayers roughly $7 million a year, with a limit of up to $1,000 per month for a family of four.
If this is successful, we're going to expand it even more.
So apparently what we're not hearing from all the criticism is that this is a test program. It's not that the first 700 families are the initial phase. It's a pilot. They're going to see what happens, and what happens might not be anything surprising. But the program is limited to families, and the credit cards will not go to single adults, which means the food they get will still be overpriced and come from the paper towel company. But critics say the idea of credit cards is simply irresponsible because credit cards promote poor spending habits, and they're synonymous with instant gratification. They are a product designed to help people spend money, not to help people save save anything. And what's even more controversial is these credit cards are going to be different than the city's SNAP program. Businesses that take this, they have to be registered in advance with the city in order to even accept the program. That means no alcohol, that means no cigarettes, and no pet supplies. But the city's program for families is not an expansion of the SNAP program. As it turns out, it's a separate program with its own rules. And that's what critics are worried about.
They will start with 500 migrant families with children in short-term hotel stays. The cards can only be used at bodegas, grocery stores, supermarkets, and convenience stores.
So the city says that these are only going to be usable for food and baby supplies, and people who get the cards are going to have to sign something that promises that that's all that they're going to use them for. So it's essentially the honor system. People caught violating the program could be removed from it. But critics say the city's soft on crime policies mean that's probably not going to happen, and they're worried the program will be abused. But let's listen to somebody who's in favor of this tell us why it's such a great idea.
You know, the best thing that ever happened in New York was letting people who come here from around the world do their own cooking. And you know what? If this is going to save the city even 10% of what they're spending right now to feed these families, then let's give it a try. Right now, it's only a pilot. We'll see if it works. If it works, expand it. Let these people have a little dignity.
So it will probably do those things. It will force people to take some responsibility for what they eat, and it will give them some agency so that they can make decisions, which is going to be the first step towards getting out of the shelter. But when you hear the real reason why this program is never going to work, you're going to wonder why it was even proposed in the first place.
Purchasing food at the supermarket is not cheap anymore. And on top of that, they don't have kitchens. So how are they going to purchase the food that they want?
The families who get these
Exactly. There's no kitchens in any of the city's shelter rooms. What are people going to do with a credit card that allows them to go out and buy raw meat and fish? And there's not even a communal kitchen in one of these shelters that people could take turns using. Proponents of the program say that people are going to leave their hotel rooms, go to Whole Foods, and buy a bunch of healthy stuff. Now, yes, that would be way better than serving people food that causes them to get sick, but I just don't see how that's going to happen. Maybe I'm missing something, but you can't do anything with raw ingredients without a preparation method. On top of that, I spoke to somebody that works inside one of the city's shelters, and they told me microwaves, hot plates, those are banned appliances. You're not allowed to have them in the rooms, and they do room inspections, and when they find those, they confiscate them and dispose of them, so there's no cooking allowed in the rooms. Apparently, the voltage rating for the hotel rooms wouldn't be able to work correctly if everybody had microwaves going at the same time. There could be a fire, there could be a blackout. Here's a dumpster full of stuff getting thrown out of one of the hotels. That looks like a mini fridge right there. There's actually two of them right at the Roosevelt. Now look, maybe I'm too stupid to understand how this program is supposed to work, but it's not adding up right now. And you know how people are probably gonna end up getting their food? They're probably gonna have to go somewhere like this pizzeria, which is downstairs at the hotel, or this urban space market across the street, which looks like it sells sushi and Indian food. Now yes, the prepaid credit cards aren't supposed to work at a pizzeria. They're only supposed to work at grocery stores and bodegas, but there are plenty of bodegas serving fast food items, smoothies, milkshakes, the list goes on and on. The point is that people are gonna have to eat food that was prepared by someone else. They're not gonna be able to prepare their own food. And that brings up some common sense options that the city skipped over that could have potentially made this whole problem with people getting enough food a lot less of a challenge. It would take over 22 years to eat at every restaurant in the city. And all these restaurants are right by the shelter where people don't have enough food. This whole situation is absolutely ridiculous. This restaurant, literally right next to the hotel on the corner. However, when the city decided to come up with a meal plan for everybody, they didn't go with restaurants. Nope, instead they went with a paper towel company and asked them to feed people. And that's worked out so well, we're now gonna pay people to feed themselves. That's definitely gonna be better, it's gonna be cheaper, but why weren't local restaurants like this place ever even considered as part of the meal plan equation? Every restaurant in the city probably knows more about feeding people than this medical services place. And unlike the hotel rooms, the restaurants actually have kitchens. Yet the city's restaurants were not asked to help feed the city's asylum seekers. Now yes, most of these menu options are way more money than the $11 per meal the city currently pays. But it's ridiculous to think that restaurants like this wouldn't jump at the chance to take on a massive government contract to feed people across the street and maybe rearrange their menu. The restaurant restaurants could also just limit their participation to takeout orders only if they don't have enough tables for everybody. You'd be saving jobs, you'd be helping local businesses, you'd be helping feed families. This is like political gold right here. But no, we didn't do that, and now we're in a position where we're just gonna fall back on giving people money and hoping that they spend it the way they've promised to spend it with that signed affidavit.
This is only 500 migrant families, by the way, and we're supposed to be happy because somehow we've been so inefficient that by saving a few dollars, the savings is $7 million potentially, we're supposed to be happy. Of course, this is just not a sustainable system. I know that, Chris knows that, you know that.
Now, the majority of asylum seekers, they're not criminals. They don't plan on abusing this new system. But critics say there's no way this is the best, cheapest way to feed people. And yes, now with the credit cards, people will be able to eat at a restaurant that's part of a bodega or a grocery store. But if the city had worked with restaurants in advance, maybe they could have created menu items that weren't $40 and $50 entrees. Maybe they could have had stuff that fit in line with people's budgets and had it be convenient within walking distance of the hotel. But controversially, this new food program is not the only thing providing payments to people. Payments that critics say will only continue digging the city deeper and deeper into a financial pit of doom. So a recent investigation has figured out that certain asylum seekers are now able to get payments directly from the state as part of a disability program. The state government has apparently expanded its safety net assistance program to include folks who may have a pending asylum application. Now, critics are saying this is just another example of something the state cannot afford, but it's perfectly in line with New York's right to shelter requirements. After all, if you have to provide somebody with a place to stay and food, you should also have to provide care for them. So technically, it's not out of line with what New York's already doing. The New York Post asked the Office of Temporary Disability how many folks might be in the program, and although an exact number wasn't given, it's estimated that only about 10% of the folks in the city's care would be eligible. Now, the New York Post goes on to say that this means 17,000 people could be in the program, but the city's shelters only have about 60 or 70,000 asylum seekers, which means I don't think the number could be higher than 7,000 people. And just last year, the city was cutting its budgets, closing down places like the library on the weekends, and they even had plans to reduce trash pickup and hire less police. Those plans have been walked back, but at every turn, the local government seems to suggest that they're running out of money at every turn. And since medical care for people living in the shelter with a disability is of the utmost importance, the city should probably stop wasting its money on food programs that don't work. And speaking of the shelters, life in 20 different facilities is about to get much harder. Here we are at the Candler Building, one of the city's shelters for single adults, and some facilities like this one could soon be subject to a new curfew.
A curfew at 20 migrant shelters will go into place Monday night. This comes after a string of violent incidents have been tied to migrants living in city shelters.
So after a number of high-profile incidents just down the street from here over at Times Square, this new curfew is going to kick in from 11 p.m. until 6 o'clock in the morning. Not at this particular building, but at 20 others, many of which are in Manhattan. Down the street from here, there was recently an attack on police officers. And on top of that, somebody with a weapon used it inside of a store and injured a tourist. And a gang of thieves were using mopeds to snatch purses and hack into people's bank accounts and drain away their savings. Now, the legal system's handling of these issues is what has drawn controversy, because many of the suspects were released without bail. And that's why humanitarian advocates say that these new curfews are retaliatory in nature, because even though nobody wants to see bad things happen to the police, they say that rolling out curfews to facilities potentially like the Candler Building won't have any effect on that type of thing. And the city might be using this as an excuse to institute curfews for a different reason.
In total, this curfew will impact 3,600 migrants, a fraction of the approximately 68,000 migrants currently in the city's care. However, groups like Legal Aid blasted this new curfew, saying this could hurt migrants and their ability to work. We think that
That's a good point. There are very few jobs that are available to people who might be in one of the shelters. One of them is delivery. The chances of working nights in a situation like that, pretty high. And if people are trying trying to get out of the shelter system, how are they going to do that if they end up losing their job? But since the city shelters are maxed out and at capacity, so much so that they are now on a revolving door situation where adults can stay for 30 days, families can stay for 60 days before they have to reapply, this could be done to help manage bed capacity. For example, if somebody's in a shelter like this and they decide to leave, they get themselves an alternate accommodation, they may not inform the people at the shelter that they no longer need their bed, and a curfew could help the city determine which beds are in use and which beds are not. But the stated purpose, safety, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. In fact, neighbors in areas of town where there is a curfew don't really think it's going to have much of an effect. And that's because most of the people who could be a victim of a crime, they're probably not out between 11 and 6. Nonetheless, curfews are coming, and credit cards are coming as well. Are those a good idea, or will they just be used for things like pizza? And how do you think the city can get enough food for the asylum seekers? Let me know. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.